So let's pick up where we left off after we talked about the connective tissue coverings of nerves. Now remember, a nerve is a whole bundle of axons, so it's got a whole bunch of cells together. And nerves can be classified by what type of signal they're carrying. So if they are sensory nerves, then they're carrying information to the brain or spinal cord. So this is incoming information. So these are basically afferent nerves. Motor nerves are then carrying information out to the effectors. And then mixed nerves are going to have both. So this is our two-way highway. So you've got some neurons in there that are bringing up incoming information or sensory information, and other cells are motor and they're carrying information out. So a nerve can be mixed and have information going both directions because it's a whole bunch of cells together. But an individual cell can only go in one direction. So if you can see, I have this pen facing one direction, and this one right now is facing the same direction. So this would be, if it's outgoing information towards the pen tip, then this would be motor. If they were going this way and they're both pointing up towards my brain, they would be sensory. But if I turn one of them around, now I have one cell in here that's carrying information down, so that's sensory, and another one that's carrying information up, and that one would be motor. Now, as it says here, most nerves are going to be mixed nerves, with rare exceptions. We like to keep these nerves organized. So we have networks of nerves, literally think of that like a fishing net, that go to very specific areas of the body. We call a network of something a plexus. So a plexus is a network of something. So if you remember, we talked about the choroid plexus, and that's a network of capillaries that make cerebrospinal fluid. There are three main nerve plexuses. Some books like to break this last one up into two. The cervical plexus is in your cervical region. So if you remember your anatomy, cervical's up here is my neck, so that's going to supply the muscles and skin of my neck. There's a very important branch off of the cervical plexus called the phrenic nerve, and that phrenic nerve is important because it stimulates your diaphragm. And if you damage your phrenic nerve and you can't stimulate the diaphragm, then you can't breathe. If you remember where your brachium is your upper arm, so your brachial plexus supplies the muscle and skin of the arms. And then remember, your lumbar region is low back and sacral is the bottom of your spine. So the lumbosacral plexus goes to muscle and skin of the legs. There's an important nerve that probably most of you have heard of that lumbosacral plexus, called the sciatic nerve. And that's that really big nerve that runs right down the back of your leg. And if you sit too long in a really uncomfortable chair or bleachers, then you get sciatica, or pain down the radiating down your leg, and that's because you've irritated this sciatic nerve. So here you can see, when we look at the plexuses, here's my brachial plexus coming off, here's my cervical plexus, and here's my lumbosacral plexus. So you can see all these branching nerves, so that if I damage one and it can't get that signal down to the leg, there are other nerves that are joining up and supplying the leg. Think of it a little bit like having more than one way you can get to your house. You probably always drive the same way. Not necessarily, but you probably do. But if that road was closed, you probably have other ways you could get to your house that wind around. And that's a little bit like your network of nerves. Now, sensory adaptation is something where your action potentials actually slow or potentially even stop due to repeated stimulation. Now this happens very, very quickly for things like smell, touch, and pressure. So if you think about it, you might put a Band-Aid on your arm and you can feel the Band-Aid when you put it on. But after a few minutes, you probably don't even feel it there anymore. So that would be becoming adapted to that feeling of touch. Smell is something that we commonly adapt to. I can just about guarantee you that you have no idea what your house smells like because you're in it every day and you've become adapted to it. So if you ever want to sell your house, I always recommend have somebody else come in and just tell you what it smells like and be prepared not to take offense because that's what it smells like. I know our house probably smells like dog, but I don't smell it anymore. Sensory adaptation does not occur for pain or proprioception. Now, if you think about it, that makes sense, right? We don't want to stop sending pain signals. We might think we do, but pain actually tells you to stop doing something that's harmful to the body. And we definitely don't want to adapt to proprioception because that's knowing where you are in space. If all of a sudden I stopped knowing that, I wouldn't be able to hold this pen. I'd be poking myself in the eye. I'd probably fall off the chair and I'd just be in a heap and I wouldn't be able to do anything. So this is very important to always know where your body is in space. Now, pain is a very complex thing, and we mentioned this a little bit before. It's due to these nociceptors that we learned about in the skin that have these kind of free nerve endings. Now, what's interesting is that your nervous tissue actually lacks any pain receptors. So I learned a joke a while back because my dad was an OBGYN, which means he studied female reproductive function and pregnancy. And there was an old joke that said, why is the OBGYN better than the neurosurgeon? Because the brain doesn't have any pain receptors. You poke a brain, nobody cares about it. You poke a vagina, you're going to hear about that. So I don't know if you laughed or not, but my dad thought it was funny. We're going to stimulate these pain receptors or nociceptors by damage to the tissue in some way, chemical, mechanical forces, or changes in temperature. But it's important to realize that pain perception is very personal. And we talked about that a bit before when we talked about my pain scale changing after a bio leak. So now childbirth is like a 3 or a 4, and bio leak would be at an absolute max 10. I think when they asked me when I went to the hospital what my pain was, and I said 10,000. So, and that's on a scale of 1 to 10. What can complicate things sometimes medically is that we can sometimes feel pain in an area other than where the stimulus is. So if I perceive pain somewhere other than the stimulus, we call that referred pain. So this is pain in a different location. And my pen is not working right now. In a different location than the stimulus. So one of the most common examples is heart discomfort or a heart attack, especially in men, is often felt as radiating pain down the left arm. It gets much more complicated for women because women tend to either not have symptoms with a cardiac event or they have very confusing symptoms like neck pain, back pain, might have chest discomfort. They might feel like they have acid reflux. So it can get very complicated. Your appendix is located down here, kind of lower right quadrant, but you can feel appendix pain higher than that or closer to the umbilicus. Or when my son had an inflamed appendix and had to have it removed, he described it as, I just don't feel good along here. So his upper abdomen just didn't feel right. And he told my dad that, who said, discomfort in the upper abdomen, hard to pinpoint, he was 15, and a male, it's probably an appendix. So he actually said, I think it sounds a little bit like he's got an appendicitis, and sure enough, the next morning he was having an appendectomy. You do not need to memorize all of the different regions for referred pain. That is something that you'll pick up in the nursing program if that's the direction that you're going. I think most people are somewhat familiar with this radiating pain in the left arm for a heart attack for men. But it's good to be aware that referred pain exists. So if somebody complains of pain in a particular area, it could mean something very different than what's located right there. All right, we're going to end there.